Let's practice installing an invisible zipper. First, you will need 2 pieces of fabric and you'll need an invisible zipper. Next, you'll place 1 piece of fabric on top of the other, right sides together, lining up the raw edges. Then stitch a basting stitch down one of the raw edges. To sew a basting stitch, I am going to adjust the length of my stitch from the standard 2.5 to a 5.0 length. To make sure you have adequate seam allowance to install the zipper, you want to sew your basting stitch at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Next, you'll open up your seam allowance by doing a simple finger press, and then you'll take it over to the iron and then press down or press open that seam allowance. Now that you've pressed open your seam allowance, we are going to be installing our invisible zipper with the right side facing down and the wrong side facing up. So you're going to have that seam allowance facing up towards you. We use either one of 2 options to attach the invisible zipper to the fabric. You can use zipper tape or you can use pins, and I'll show you both. Now grab your zipper. With the zipper pull facing up, that's the right side of your zipper, and then the other side is the wrong side. You are going to identify the right side and the wrong side of your fabric. So the side with the seam allowance is the wrong side. You're going to place your right side of your zipper onto the seam allowance, aligning the actual metal zipper teeth with that center of your seam allowance. And you're going to have the top of the zipper pull be right at the top of your fabric. Now, before we tape or pin down the zipper onto the fabric or the seam allowance, I just want to point out one thing. We are only going to be stitching or sewing the zipper to the seam allowance. We will not be sewing and stitching the zipper to the entire piece of fabric. We are only dealing with the seam allowance. Now, if you have zipper tape, you can apply the zipper using zipper tape. Cut a piece of the zipper tape the length of your zipper, and then you are going to apply the sticky portion of that zipper tape to the seam allowance close to the edge of the seam, as close as possible without going over. Then you're going to scratch or score that zipper tape before you remove the piece of paper, the paper portion from the actual tape itself. Now it's time to attach your zipper. First, open your zipper, then apply it with the right side facing down. You are going to line up your zipper with the zipper stop the top of the zipper stop right below the edge of the fabric. And you are going to place it again with the zipper teeth close to the edge of the center of the seam. And then you're going to apply some pressure. Again, we are only applying this to the seam allowance itself. When using zipper tape, you are actually replacing the step of base stitching the zipper down. However, in this example, I am also going to do a basting stitch to demonstrate how we're only stitching through the seam allowance. Now that we've based stitched or zipper taped one side down, we can move on to the other. But before we move on to the other, I just want to show you how, one, we've only stitched through the seam allowance, and 2, that we are stitching close to the edge of the zipper teeth without actually stitching through the zipper teeth. To attach the other side of the zipper, you are going to flip all of the fabric over to one side, leaving only a single layer of seam allowance on the other side, and this is what we're going to attach the other side of the zipper to. Now, the other method that you can use to attach the zipper to the seam allowance is using pins and a basting stitch. So you can see that I have pinned the zipper to the seam allowance only, and now we're going to go to the sewing machine to apply a basting stitch. Now we have applied that basting stitch close to the zipper teeth, not going through the zipper teeth, and only to the seam allowance, not the actual fabric itself. Now that we've attached the zipper to the seam allowance of the fabric using either zipper tape or a basting stitch, now it's time to remove the basting stitch that we used to attach both sides of the fabric together. Once you remove the basting stitch, you'll be able to unzip in the zipper. But before doing so, you'll want to remove some of the old basting stitch so it doesn't get caught in the zipper. You also see that when you spread open the fabric, you can still see some of the zipper. And part of that is because we've only base stitched the zipper to the fabric. We'll now need to do a more permanent stitch, and that permanent stitch will be closer to the zipper teeth, and that will prevent the zipper from showing through. Now we're getting ready to put a more permanent stitch into our zipper tape onto our seam allowance. So let's take a look at what we're going to actually do. There is a little groove that is right next to the zipper teeth, and that's where we're going to be placing our permanent stitch. You do have to take your fingers and roll back the zipper tape just slightly so you can see that groove, but that's where you'll be placing your needle, and you'll see that it is that little groove right next to the zipper teeth. In order for us to get into this groove, we'll need to sew that zipper into that groove with the zipper actually open. When sewing the permanent stitch of the zipper into the seam allowance of the fabric, I'm going to adjust the stitch length from a 5 to a 2.5. I've switched my sewing machine foot to a zipper foot. And then you can see that I'm opening up that zipper so that it exposes that little groove. And I've placed my needle into that groove. Once I've stitched both sides from top to bottom, the zipper will be permanently attached to the seam allowance. And you can see how that stitch is right in the groove. It's important to get as close as possible, but not to go through the actual zipper teeth itself, or you won't be able to zip up the zipper. Now the last step is to test your zipper. Make sure that you can close your zipper smoothly and open your zipper smoothly. And then you'll also want to pull apart your fabric to make sure you can't see any of the zipper. And if you can just go right back in and stitch a little closer to the zipper teeth. Again, making sure you're not going through the zipper teeth. And just as a reminder, we're only sewing into the seam allowance. And you can see that here that you're only sewing the seam allowance. I encourage you to practice this a few more times. Your first one won't be perfect, and that's okay. Thanks for watching.